Looks like we have it figured out. The LZ0 thrust bearing failure is answered. Thrust bearing failed in this LZ0 engine just over 7,500 miles. Normally when they fail, we have bearings that look like this and they're in the engine oil pan. This one was still running. We had low oil pressure. The replacement was needed because of the crankshaft end play. Now that's a lot, but the good thing is this engine was running, which means that these bearings should not be in the engine oil pan, or there should only be one because, like I said, it was running. So here's our plan. With 7,500-ish miles on this engine, we're going to drain the oil, which we already did. The rear cover is going to be removed. We're going to go ahead and peek inside the engine oil that is left inside the oil pan because it's quite amazing how much is left in there. We're going to remove the front cover and then the oil pan. We'll remove the oil cooler, take a look at the chains, remove the chains, then we're going to remove the oil pump, we're going to remove the lower crankcase, get to the connecting rods, remove those, then we're going to remove the crankshaft to get to the thrust bearing, and then we're going to go ahead and take a closer look at that. If all of this goes successfully, we'll have a little bit more answers on there, and thankfully we've got Oriole's Tupac here to watch over. I already drained the engine oil from this. There was quite a bit in there, so it definitely was not an oil consumption problem. There was no heavy sparkling or anything of the nature inside there, so we don't have a whole lot of metal debris, which is awesome because that means that this is going to be mostly intact. I'm going to go ahead and put this drain plug back in it. That way we can see just how much oil is left after an engine oil change. And you can see the slope of the oil pan is correct. The engine is fitting level for the most part. So this is going to indicate exactly how much oil is left in there after an oil change, which is an ongoing debate online. So they did revise the engine oil pan, put the drain plug right here, and I do have a video on that. Be sure to check that out. With the rear cover off, we can now see the engine oil pump belt, which is the big controversy. Here it is. There's our 2026 belt. This is the one that's being used. Same as the one that was used in 2020. Here's the amount of play that we have in there. It's really not a problem. I think it's all blown out of proportion. But what we're going to do is remove this belt and pulley. Then we're going to be able to look inside there, I hope, and see how much oil is left in that pan. All right, let's get in there. See how much engine oil is left in that pan, which actually is a little bit more difficult to see than I expected. So let's go ahead and remove the pan. What I'll do for you is remove the pan like this, so that way we can see how much is left inside there after an oil change. Here we go. Here's the engine oil pan as just removed. We do have a lot of debris right there. Look at how much oil is left in. This is how much is left in there after an oil change. There's a lot of old nasty oil gets left in there. The newer pan has a better design, but that's what comes on the new replacement engines and also the 26s. But you see this? That's a thrust bearing. So it looks like we do have one thrust bearing that came apart at least. We have more. That looks like threads. All right, so that's interesting. We got more. Those are threads. Is that a bolt? This should be interesting. A lot of metal debris in here. Here's the rest of that thrust bearing. So we have one that came apart. That is some thick, sludgy goo nastiness right there. There we go. Let's tear into this thing and see what failed. It's time for a check-in. We got our oil drain taken care of. The rear cover is off. Oil left in the pan. We showed that. Remove the front cover and the oil pan. We need to remove the front cover, and then we're going to flip this over. All right, remove the front cover and the engine oil pan. Now remember, the engine oil pan came off. Now what are the threaded chunks? This is our new question, and I wasn't prepared to have a new question in there, but this is what we're adding in. As we tear down this engine, this should be interesting because I'm curious what those threaded chunks are. So what we're gonna go ahead and do, oh, we can cross off that right there too. Oil cooler done. Chains, we're gonna wait till we're flipped over. So let's go ahead and flip this engine over. And like I said, we did find thrust bearing. We did find threaded chunks in there. Let's see what else we got. So what we need is for the chain to come off of the crank, so that way when we unbolt the crank, we can pull the crank up, which is not going to happen with the setup that this is. I was really hoping that I could avoid pulling. Ooh, look what I found. While removing the timing chain, there was actually a piece that came out. There it is right there. What is that? There we go. We will now remove the engine oil pump, which is held on with 4 10mm bolts. We're going to go disconnect that connector right there. And then we'll remove all of the Allen bolts and some 10s that are holding this lower crankcase down. Once we take that off, we will then be able to see the crankshaft as well as the connecting rods. And that's where the real fun begins. All right, looks like we know which side of the bearing failed. So we've got the one on this side, on the rear of the engine is the one that actually failed. Looks like I wasted my time taking out the timing chain when we didn't even need to. All we should have done was just go straight in here, and then we would find out that it's just missing a thrust bearing. We have one more piece down there, which I will fish out in just a moment, but you could see that we're missing the piston oil squirter there. So that means there was so much movement that it actually hit the oil squirter, broke apart. That's our loss of engine oil pressure, and that's ultimately what set the code. And there we go. So thrust bearing, I believe these are coming with one missing from the factory, potentially, allegedly. I am only finding one thrust bearing, one complete thrust bearing within the system. There is a piece of one down there, and then we have the other little bit of debris inside the oil pan, and definitely not enough to show for 2 thrust bearings. We definitely don't have any more pieces throughout. We do have the complete underside taken apart, and we're able to see. And there are no other pieces in here. Now there definitely should be more thrust bearing material, because this engine right here has 2 thrust bearings, and that's where these go, right on there. There's the surface. This is an LM2 that I'm comparing to, but thrust bearing goes on each side of the crankshaft there to control the forward and backward movement, and this one appears to be assembled with just one. Now that is fantastic news, and let me tell you why. Because if you have a brand new truck and you go for the crankshaft end play check, if it checks out good, I think it's good. You know, I think this should boost confidence, if anything, as far as that goes, because you either got one installed with 1 or you got one installed with 2. I hope I'm correct on that, because I think that will set a lot of minds at ease and potentially put this whole thing to bed. Why this wasn't discussed earlier on prior bulletins or anything like that, it just says thrust bearing failure. I think having this information would have definitely eased some minds, but at the same time I could be incorrect. But I'm just going by what I see here, and I see the amount of debris that's inside this engine versus how much should be in there, and we're definitely missing a lot of pieces. I know what you're thinking, and I'm thinking it too. Well, what does that bearing look like? Since we have it disassembled, let's take a closer look. There we go. Looks like we got some carnage. All right, we got our chains taken care of. Pump is off. Lower crankcase is off. Connecting rods, we didn't need to do that. Crankshaft, we didn't even need to pull that. We got to the thrust bearing, only one. What are the threaded chunks? We got that figured out. That is our oil squirter. We have a full video that compares the LZ0 to the LM2. I highly recommend you check out that video, and that is what is coming up next. Be sure to check that out. Till next time, see ya.